Hey there. All right. Welcome, everyone. We are live and recording. It's just a pleasure to have Scott Barker here, who's partner at Go-to-Market Fund, to have a conversation around ecosystem-led growth. I'm sure a lot of people here are familiar with GTM Fund and are looking forward to the convo. Just before we get started, few things to keep in mind. One is that we're recording and we'll follow up with recording and all that good stuff. And then the other thing is, we encourage chat participation. There's emoji features and all this kind of stuff that you can participate in. So, give us some feedback and let us know. Let us know if you have any questions along the way, and we'll try and address those as we go along here. So, and with that, let's kick it off. So first thing for you, Scott, is just, I like to start with origin stories, and maybe you could start with what is Go-to-Market Fund for those people who don't know, and what led you to become a partner there.
For sure. Yeah. First off, thank you for hosting this, Kevin, and thank you to the Common Room team. It's been really nice getting to know your team and a little bit more about the technology, and you guys are doing some really cool stuff. So excited for this conversation. Origin story. When it's framed like that, I feel like I have to come up with something as cool as Batman's story or something, but I'm definitely nowhere near as cool as that. But I guess, I'm not sure the audience that's with us right now, but, hello, my name is Scott Barker, co-founder and partner at GTMfund. Sure, we have a wide variety of titles and folks that are at different stages in their career. I think something that's unique is I actually started as a BDR way back in the day, and really worked my way up through a ton of different functions on the go-to-market side of the house. I started my career in fintech, was then able to start building out and leading BD teams at a digital asset management software company, and then built out an account management function there before making a jump over to running revenue and partnerships at a company called Sales Hacker that you may have heard of. It was actually a media company focused on helping startups figure out what the fastest growing companies in the Valley were doing from a sales, marketing, customer success standpoint. That was a super fun business to build. We got to partner with Salesforce, Adobe, DocuSign, Gong, Outreach, and put on these really big, large-scale conferences all over the world, Salesforce, London, New York. And that was, really, really pivotal for my career in just helping me build out a network or an ecosystem, which we'll talk more about. But then in 2018, Sales Hacker was acquired by Outreach, and I spent 4 years helping scale that business. It was one of those runs that you feel very fortunate to have. We went about from, it was 20 mil ARR to 250 mil ARR while I was there, and eventually became the youngest director in company history at the time, and was able to build out a strategic engagement division, which essentially was us leveraging ecosystem-led growth before that was a thing. And then in 2021, my partner and I, Max Altschuler, launched GTMfund. Many know was the CEO of Outreach, was nice enough to let us do it on the side. And, the idea was, why don't we collect the best CROs, CMOs, VPs of sales, VPs of marketing we know, the best operators in the world, pool some capital, go find some great startups to invest in, and then use our go-to-market expertise to help them, scale. And we were very lucky that if fund market fit is a thing, founders in the venture ecosystem really responded well to that. So it was kind of off to the races after that. And we now have 260 operators as part of the fund, investors in the fund. Some larger institutions like Bain and Foundation and David Sachs from Kraft also have invested, and a really large portfolio of successful companies. So it's been a hell of a journey. And I got to shout out Vanta, who just hit 100 mil ARR today.
Right, I saw that, yeah.
And owner.com just raised a 33 million Series B today, they announced. So congrats to both of them. But that's a bit of the story. And then, more recently, we kind of went back to our roots a little bit, and we actually reacquired that media company from Outreach. Sales
Oh, really? Yeah,
Hacker
nice. Nice.
rebranded it to GTM now. Yes, now we talk about go to market more broadly, not just so much focused on sales. So if anyone's looking to up level their game, it's a good resource.
Yeah, I mean, I completely remember Sales Hacker back in the day, and like this is a time for another story of like how that went with outreach and all that stuff. But you spoke a little bit about ecosystem led growth, and I think that there's like a lot of X led growth types of motions, or people trying to brand something that like catches fire. But I wonder if you could just start with, what exactly is ecosystem growth? Like, how do you define it? And then we can kind of like frame the rest of the conversation around that.
For sure. Yeah. I don't really care what people call it. There's like go to network, there's ecosystem led growth. I guess I'll answer that question with a story, which helped to kind of click in my head how important it is to think of it as a channel for growth. I remember was at about a year and a half into my time at Outreach, and we were really trying to break into larger accounts, bigger strategic kind of non-ICP companies, and we were doing like a win-loss analysis on a deal we actually lost. And we had the executive team there and a bunch of people being, why we lose this deal? And I remember one of our execs didn't know that this deal was happening, which it's in itself kind of crazy. And then we looked at the buying committee, and he's like, this person was in my wedding party. Like, how did I not know about this deal? Why was it not surfaced? Why was I not involved? We had so much connectivity, and that could have been, a big difference in us, ultimately winning that deal. And so that made it really obvious to me that, there was nascent networks or nascent connections within the outreach ecosystem, through our executives, through our board, through our community, through our VCs. We just weren't leveraging to the fullest, and we needed a strategy and people focused on understanding that entire ecosystem to help with growth, but also deal velocity, goes on and on. So I don't know if that's a perfect definition. I haven't found a perfect definition, but usually I speak to that story. And all of us on this call, even if you're a small startup, you'd be surprised at how big your reach is now in this, digital first world we all live in.
Yeah, I love this story to like drive it home, where that's like I've had similar situations where it's like, I'm actually, connected with this person, they're a good friend, and like it doesn't get surfaced, and then like the deal's lost it. It's just like, oh, why didn't you tell me? I would have, pulled some strings, or I could have, vice versa for the CEOs too. One thing, in terms of like defining ecosystem like growth too, I wonder if there's like, pillars that you think of, or, what are the different channels of ecosystem led growth to think about, if it's, I know it's like close networking, but like, is there more to it than that, or a different like framework to think?
For sure. Yeah. I roughly think about it in three pillars. And they're all extremely important, but it's pretty simple. The first one is build. It's about building out your network. You can't extract any value if the network's not there. So that is finding ways to create real connection and real distribution. And LinkedIn is obviously, if you're in B2B anyway, assuming most of the audience is an incredibly powerful tool for this. Me personally, I started creating content on LinkedIn probably 8-9 years ago, and it's really almost impossible to quantify the value that's had in my career, and also for the companies that I've been a part of. Having like this access to almost 50,000 people that I can like direct message is insane. People 10 years ago would have paid $1 million for that, so you need to think about, that strategy. And it doesn't always have to be through content. That's what worked for me. But then as you go down that journey, of, creating a presence on LinkedIn or whatever social channel you decide to. Over time, you will need to transfer that connectivity ideally to channels that you own. For us, that's now the go-to-market podcast, the go-to-market newsletter, because you don't want to be a slave to like the algorithm. You need to have ways to connect. Maybe that's creating a Slack channel or a community of your own. But I think, the build part is about always thinking about how can I add nodes to my network. And I can't tell you how many times I'll hear someone say like, I don't know you, but I feel like I know you. And these little pieces of content that you create are things that work for you when you're not in the room. And so it's incredibly powerful. And, you then have to cross that chasm ideally and show up at industry events, host your own dinners, and solidify those relationships further. It's not just all about, digitally creating a huge network. But I think, owned media is definitely having a moment right now. And if anyone's more interested in that, our friends at Audience Plus, I think, are doing a great job creating some content around that. But build is the first pillar. Second pillar is value, providing opportunities to provide as much value to that network beyond your product or service. This is huge. Like the value pillar, you're not having a commercial discussion yet. It's largely around education. When I was an IC and I was a seller, I used to have this thought experiment where anytime I was on a demo, I would literally think, okay, would they pay me for this hour? Could I be so valuable that they pay me for this hour above and beyond like the product or service? Like that's just a byproduct. So finding ways to create value, that can be content, that can be surveys, that can be reports, things that they can't get anywhere else. And then the third pillar, which we'll work on the name because the name has some negative connotations, but it's about extracting, right? Extracting that value. Of course, that has bad connotations, but at the end of the day, we're all here to either drive revenue or solve the problems that we have in our business. And so this one is maybe the trickiest pillar to get right. And you don't want to do that extraction too early. But anytime that you're extracting value, A, you need to know that your value bank is high. You've created enough value that it's okay to extract some. And B, you need to find ways to make it a win-win for both parties. And the most obvious one is identifying a problem that your product or service can ultimately solve. You'll get revenue, they get their problem solved. So those are kind of the three pillars and roughly how I look at it.
Nice. I'm already going off script a little bit here, but I have to ask a follow-up question too, especially around like I love the framing of like, how can I, make it so like if I'm giving a demo, they would pay me for that time. A question I have around that is like, how did you convince them to take that demo that you would provide that value, or is that something that happened like after the fact? Like, how did you get them to like actually say like, oh, this is actually going to be good use of my time?
Yeah, I think a good thing to think about in that case, and this is oftentimes partnering with, your marketing team or your enablement team. And, an interesting thing, and a sales leader of mine told me this back in the day, and it kind of just like stuck with me, is at one point you actually talk to more of, let's say you're selling into VPs of customer success. You actually talk to more VPs of customer success than this VP of customer success that you're just talking to than they do. You spend your whole day, sometimes 6-7 hours talking to VPs of customer success. If you're an AE selling into that, or a sales leader selling into that persona. So it's about understanding themes, understanding trends, what's their biggest problems these days, how are those people solving it? And you should be a pretty knowledgeable human on how people and their peers are solving this above and beyond your product or service. So, infusing those in cold outreach content you're creating, LinkedIn posts, Twitter, commenting on their LinkedIn things with strategies that you've seen working, showing up in their communities, and sharing, oh, I just talked to a VP that solved this problem this way, or they're testing these 3 experiments. And so those are some of the ways I think you can start to do that. And it's almost a mental switch of like, all right, I'm not a seller. I'm here to become an expert of my prospects world. And you can very quickly if you're spending, X amount of time with them every day.
Yeah, I love that mentality. Okay, so within the pillars of ecosystem-led growth, there's like, okay, you're building your audience, and then you're providing that audience with value, and like throughout all of that, there's probably some signals that the people who are part of that ecosystem who you're targeting are showing. Maybe it's just like a follow, or maybe it's like engaging with content. Or maybe it's like showing up to an event. So like, I feel like there's all these different like signals, and I'm wondering like how, I think a lot of people on the call here would probably want to know like where to get started. Like, okay, so we started doing this stuff. Like, how do we start, getting to the extract value, or do we start extracting value in like terms of like signal strength or whatever kind of proxies for like where to get started, you think?
Yeah, for sure. I'll try and answer that through the different pillars and kind of like signals you can look for. And a lot of my thinking around this came before there was a lot of great tools. So it was more of an art than a science than it is today. Leverage technology now, and we can talk about a few of them, Common Room being at the forefront.
Don't be afraid to name names. You can name names. Yeah.
I mean, like, Common Room is huge. Tools like Cabal, tools like Crossbeam, all these tools are tools I would have killed for back in the day. But signals you can look for kind of on the build pillar, look for communities that you can join where your target personas live, social likes and comments. If you're lucky enough to get any sort of product usage data from a tool like Common Room or others, look if they're maybe building a new integration. That is a great signal that there's someone to build a connection with. Maybe they created a new workflow, they're using it in a different way, they invited a teammate, maybe they asked a relevant question in a Slack community you own or you're a part of. Even just like email response time, like if you are emailing back and forth, do they get back to you in a day or do they get back to you in 2 weeks? That might be a good signal to continue to build that relationship if they're very responsive. Obviously, time and tool, if you can track that as a marketer or sales leader, that's huge. If they're writing about the challenges you solve, a lot of people have podcasts and blogs now, keeping an eye on that. That's a big one. But yeah, as you can see, it's obviously a lot to manage. And I think it was very much an art back in the day. It's much more of a science now. But that would be like the first bucket. And then the value bucket is about, so all those different things, and there's many more, but you can identify these kind of signals. And then the value is in each point of those signals, it's showing up with relevant, helpful information at each of those stages, and they require different levels of education. So I think every one of those signals that you identify should have a small, simple play associated with them. And once you identify like a theme that they do X amount of signals, then okay, then we run this play. And you kind of bucket them, and maybe that's when you put together an executive dinner. Okay, these are at the same level of engagement in our community. So why don't we do, and then we have 15 of them in Boston, why don't we do an executive dinner? Because they're all kind of thinking about the same things. And it's not going to be executive dinner by Common Room. It's going to be, how to make sense of high intent signals, or all the stuff that people are care about with their peers. Or you could invite them on something like this, your podcast or a live event. Golf trips seem to be back, so maybe invite them on a golf trip together. And I think part of it, when you start shifting into these more like intent-based, kind of signal-based marketing, we got obsessed with being very proactive in marketing. We all build like a year-long marketing plan. And something that's difficult about this, but also presents an opportunity, is when you're really paying attention, your marketing and your sales plays and plans need to be more fluid and reactive to these signals. And so you have to have the ability to spin up a dinner fast, to spin up a value add digital event fast, and just be a little more, yeah, I guess reactive. And then the last piece on extract, it's a little bit intuitive, I think. Again, going back to the art of once they hit that threshold of signal strength. But you probably could, and I know companies that do give each signal, you weight it almost like we used to do with like lead scoring and
Lead
things.
scoring, yeah.
And then it's time to broach a commercial discussion. What I have found is one of the better approaches than going and having the commercial discussion with that person or people that have had the value is sometimes you can actually use that to fly right to the top of maybe it's their boss or the ultimate decision maker, and you can get a warm intro to that person, and this person kind of becomes your champion for you to go have that discussion, and it can accelerate deal cycles quite a bit.
And then like just a follow up to all that, because I feel like it's not just one person driving this. Like, how do you what's the committee like to get some sort of something off the ground, or to run an experiment to see if like this approach is going to work? If we could share about how to make it happen.
Yeah. So it's similar to like when ABM, became a thing, and people tried and failed. And like the only companies that actually pulled off account-based marketing well was when like it was the entire organization that was bought into something like this. I think you need the entire company to bought into this idea of ecosystem-led growth and everyone leveraging their network and everyone is responsible for revenue. I don't care if you're the VP of product, engineering, whatever, like we're all here, we all have networks, they're all valuable. I'll give you a really like actionable thing that got outreach thinking about this way, that we were kind of all on the same team and we were all driving to this idea of ecosystem led growth. And it started with just a big deal review call where we would have executives from across the entire organization. They weren't all go to market folks. And we would have an AE, two AEs, we would block an hour, two AEs would present a big opportunity in their pipeline and be like, hey, here's where it's stuck. We're trying to get to this champion. They're caught up in this, that, and the other thing. And then you'd be surprised that how many different strategies we would come up with in that hour, leveraging the entire executive team. That was helpful kind of in the switch. And then, that ended up into us basically getting the top 20 executives at outreach, mapping all their connections on LinkedIn, getting VAs in the Philippines to, map that to target accounts. Same thing with our VCs, things with our board. Then I would get them to go and quickly go through and just do green, yellow, orange, like how strong that connection was. And then once we got like a strong connection, then we would decide a play of like, okay, are they ready for that commercial discussion or are they still in the build pillar? Let's create a way to facilitate build and value so that we can get them to the attraction pillar, which could take 9 months. And that's kind of why you need the whole organization on board. Is it's not a immediate flip. You can't just flip the switch and it happens, tomorrow. So just like a lot of big initiatives, they require time.
It sounds like, and it probably is part of like an account-based approach too. Sounds very like similar, yeah.
It's super similar. I think a lot of the themes of kind of account-based marketing are very similar to ecosystem-led growth. It's just expanding. I think ABM was very like, here are the sales and marketing plays we're going to run, and then ecosystem-led growth is like, let's expand what our network could be even outside of our organization. It's like partners, it's community, it's VCs, it's board, it's everyone. But typically it is, a subset of accounts that you're trying to triangulate on.
I'm having to go on mute because my cat is yelling to go outside. The troubles of working from home sometimes is funny. It's raining and he's like, I want to go outside. I'm like, you can't. But anyway, I think one trend that we're seeing is that especially on the marketing side, is that lead generation and things that aren't driving pipeline are kind of like taking a backseat, and like there's a huge focus on pipeline. And I know from experience that like ecosystem led growth is like one of our, like, if you look back at the historical pipeline generation, it's often like, oh, I was referred by this person, and there was a partner, or this person who was a VC or whatever. So I'm wondering, like, how you can like quantify, and how teams can quantify, and how to think about performance when it comes to this approach.
For sure. I think like the main KPIs is always going to be, revenue. There's going to be a portion where the revenue is like fully originated from it, but it also could be, influenced. And then a big thing that we saw as well was just deal velocity. Sales cycles shorten because a lot of times if you've got a deal in pipeline, you can use the ecosystem to and the folks that you're connected with to get higher in the organization and have your CEO talk to their CEO or VP talk to their VP like faster. So shortening sales cycles was a big one, but ultimately it comes down to pipeline revenue and then increased deal velocity. I think those are the main metrics that you should be focused on. Because I think the days of the MQL are over a little bit, I think. And like, sure, you can track it if you want, but it doesn't matter if that's not turning into real pipeline. And I think marketing orgs that are purely focused and incentivized on just top of the funnel are not succeeding in this market. I think they need to ride more shotgun with the sales team through the whole process. And their job is just to make the sales cycle easier at all stages in whatever way they can. And, this trend happened a while ago, but, there are still marketing teams and leaders that don't own a revenue number, which is insane to me. Revenue is the North Star. Everyone and everything you do should be driving towards that. And you need, one unified strategy. So having the MQLs live in a separate bucket is everything else just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I always think like, okay, if I tell a seller I'm gonna like double their MQL volume, they'll like roll their eyes. But if you tell them that you'll double their like opportunities or pipeline, they'll be like, yeah, I love you, So it really makes a big difference. Cool. We're getting some questions here, and like I have just one last one, and I want to try to keep us on time here. So I think like the natural next thing would be like, how do you identify and approach like the potential strategic partners? Like, who do you go to first? Like, how do you prioritize like how to like execute this strategy and who to partner with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think partners come in many forms. I think the first step is honestly just doing a deep dive into your executive team. They don't even have to be go-to-market executives. So it's understanding the networks they all own, past companies they've worked with. And then the next step is going to your VCs. So, VCs, it's comical. Everyone's like, how can I help? Well, like if you bring them a strategy, well, here's the 10 intros I want this month, and we're going to have a cadence of 10 intros, they're happy to go to work for you. They just don't know what you need and how to do it. Make it super easy for them, build a template. If you're lucky enough to have a board or an advisory board, same thing, map it out, make it super easy for them, give them context on the accounts that you're trying to break into. Those are like super, super kind of quick wins. Mm-hmm. And then when you look outside of the direct organization, I think they're roughly, you could bucket them into kind of three categories. One is like a brand partner. So is it just helpful to be associated with this brand? Because they're maybe bigger than you or more successful than you. And if your customers or your prospects see that you're doing something with Amex, they're going to think you're bigger than you are. And you can, leverage that to, go back to the first pillar, which is build that network. Second one is, more traditional, like co-selling partners. Are you complementary? Is your technology or service complementary? Do you sell to the same people? I think an important thing to think about in this one is there's kind of a hierarchy structure, I guess, in when you adopt technology. Like, I think of like rev technology, you're going to adopt like, a CRM, and then you're going to get a data source, and you'll probably get an engagement tool, and then maybe an enablement tool. And you have to figure out where you sit in that hierarchy and see if you're at a similar stage to your partners, or else one partner will be driving way more value than the other, and it won't make for a great partnership. So think about that. Similar, just like stage of how big your company is, like trying to go set up a co-selling partnership with Salesforce right off the get-go. If you're a startup, like, it's just never going to work. Even if you somehow get them to sign, they're never going to give you any value. So, similar sized organizations, as well as similar to where you sit on the life cycle of the purchase. And then, there's also just partners where you can set up win-win incentives that is around, could be referrals, could be they have a huge newsletter, and you have a big well-known podcast, and you can just swap audiences basically. And that's, again, more on the build side. And then, again, I mentioned them already, but Crossbeam can be a good one for that second co-selling partner. And then Cabal is a great tool for the first one I mentioned, which is UPC's boards and executive teams.
Yeah, those tools are we use them at Common Room to like see where there's overlap in audience. If you have a customer base or target audience that you're going after, like Crossbeam or Reveal or something like that is really great for figuring out who to partner with, and that's kind of what led us to partner with Go-to-Market Fund and some other people like RevGenius. So great stuff there. I'm going to turn to audience questions. We have a few, and folks feel free to add more questions and comments in there. I'm going to show this one on stage from Jonathan. I wonder if you could share some companies or individuals you think are doing ecosystem-led growth well.
I can't actually see the question, but what companies are doing this really well? I think Outreach does it well. Hopefully they're still running a similar program to when I was there. I think obviously Cabal and Crossbeam sort of leading the way, using their own software to dog food or drink their own champagne, so to speak. Someone who did this really well was they did this. They were one of the first to do this really well. Actually, was Sendoso. They did a really interesting thing around. They created a really large like micro advisory board and gave very, very small amounts of equity to like 40, 50 influencers, and then used Cabal to understand how big that network was. And I know that did really well for them. So that was an interesting example. Another tactic that you could potentially run if you're a startup. Who else?
I know HubSpot. I mean, I know HubSpot's like a go-to example for lots of things, but they invested early on very heavily in their partnership program, and which is kind of like the earlier version of this. And like now it's like 30, maybe 50% of their revenue comes from that like partnership ecosystem led revenue model. So I think they're a good example. And there's probably like some case studies out there around their approach. So
totally. Yeah, great call out. HubSpot was the OG, I think, at like partner and ecosystem led growth.
For sure. Like a lot of other things too. Okay, there's another question here. I think this was in I don't know if you can see it, but I think it's in relation to the MQL comment earlier. which is like, why is it insane? Is it an attribution problem? And I think this is in regards to like, why is it not a good metric to use MQLs as a proxy for success?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to track, but I think a lot of times I've seen misalignment with marketers saying, "Well, MQLs are going up, and it's not affecting actual opportunities or pipeline," and then you know marketing is thinking they're getting a false signal that what they're doing is what they should keep doing, and they need to adjust the strategy if it's not turning into pipeline. So um, I would say that pipeline opportunities are a much higher signal for success than MQLs.
I got a follow-up clarification on that too. So it was more that we mentioned that marketing should have a revenue number, but in order to do that, we need a comp structure in place to align the marketing team accordingly. They're like asking if that's like what we need to do, or how do you have a marketing team have a revenue number at the same time?
Yeah, I personally, I am a very revenue-oriented human, so I think everyone should be tied to a revenue number who has the ability to influence that number in any way, and their comp structure should reflect that. So yeah, I think marketers should have bigger bonus structures, bigger commission structures that is tied to the overall revenue number. I mean, I honestly wouldn't mind seeing that in just about every job function in a software company, because
Yeah.
that's
One
if you have any ability to influence it. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing we did, we transitioned to at Common Room is we were using MQLs and just like, I mean, of course, you still want to look at like all the leading indicators, even if it's just like website traffic. Website traffic turns into MQLs, and like that is ideally some predictor of like what will eventually turn into revenue. We ended up moving from our MQL number being the North Star metric to pipeline, and we define pipeline as something that someone's taken a meeting with an AE. They have certain types of qualification criteria that we set for a firmographic criteria that we set for a target account, and then did that deal or did that conversation like move to the next stage, which would be another follow-up conversation, and that was like a stage two, we call it stage 2 opportunity, which was associated with pipeline. And so like, and that number or that metric would convert at a pretty predictable rate, or it does convert at a pretty predictable rate down the funnel. And so if we align, if the thought process around that is like, if we align the marketing's number around pipeline creation, then that gives us the freedom to be like, okay, we're providing a lot of MQLs from Google search, but those MQLs aren't converting into pipeline. Then we can like reduce the stress of the MQL hamster wheel and say like, we don't need those MQLs. It could, because we're going to focus on the things that are going to create more pipeline. And that's like the number that we're measured on. So that was like a really big change. And then like the sales team loves it too, because like you're not requiring them to like work all these MQLs that are not then they're not going to convert, and then they have more time to focus on the stuff that will convert, and their number in efficiency goes up quite a lot as a result of that. So that's what we did. I think other people are doing similar stuff, but it's working well so far.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and then just incentives are aligned. I know for me, I would rather my AE team have 3 demos instead of 6 if I know those are the highest quality time, and then they can just provide that better value experience and spend more time in that thought process of, okay, how can I be the most valuable? I think if we overload them, you slip into bad habits.
Cool. I think we have time for just like one last question. This one I have around measuring how ecosystem led growth compares to the other types of growth, whether it's like inbound led growth or outbound or product led. And is it like something that like you would completely like put all your eggs in that basket, or does it like augment the others? Like, how do you see it kind of like identifying which of those different like led growth motions to invest in?
Yeah, I think it augments your other motions. I think you have to decide if you're going to be a PLG company, a sales led company, whatever motion your buyers are naturally pulling you towards, and they want to buy. And then ecosystem-led growth would sit, on top of all of it and make it all more efficient. Ideally, the time to buy and your average deal cycle goes down. Your average time to create a new opportunity goes down. In my eyes, it's the cheapest and most efficient way to grow. And you can have even just one, VP of partnerships doing this really well, and they can drive, millions of ARR when this is done right. And it's just about extracting the value that is already there. You've already created it over the course of your career, over the course of the life cycle of your company. And it's just finding creative ways to unlock it. And, you don't need a bloated sales team to run this kind of motion. And yeah, I think over time we'll always need salespeople and we'll always need BDRs, but you might need fewer if you're running this motion well. But yeah, that's how I think about it. And I think it pairs really, really nicely with the PLG motion, because you can go look at, all the product signals that are happening, how many signups you have. And then if you have your ecosystem mapped out, you can find the quickest path to the economic buyer. And it's much easier to start that conversation if you have, high intent signals, people are using it. And, it saves your BDR team going cold, trying to get their attention for, 3 months.
Yeah. And you can also incentivize partners to push people towards that free or like product led motion, so that like over time those become like bigger deals as they like get value out of the product. Seen that happen before too. Cool. Well, let's wrap it up. And Scott, I just wanted to thank you again so much for your time. This session is all recorded. We will follow up with recording and all that good stuff. Before we head out, Scott, is there anything you want to plug, or where can people find you? All that good stuff.
No, you can go check out the GTM newsletter. You can go check out the GTM podcast. We're talking to great operators always. And I think, last thing I'll leave people with is ecosystem-led growth is very a long-term thinking play. One of my favorite quotes in the world is play long-term games with long-term people. And, the quicker you start building your network and doing it in an authentic, real way, it does just have a compounding effect over the course of your career and the course of building your business. So that's what I'll leave people with, and I hope that was valuable. Thanks for the great questions, and appreciate you hosting me.
Great, of course. Thanks, Scott. Take it easy. Have a good one, everyone. Bye. Thank you.
See you, everyone. Bye.